Dear Africans, let's talk about these very powerful yet invisible hands that have held back Africa's economic progress since independence. These invisible hands operate in the shadows under a concept known as neocolonialism. This has been the continuation of economic control over Africa's resources by the former colonial powers. But first, a brief background about how this started. Held from 1884 to 1885 as a sequel to the 300-year-long slave trade, the Berlin Conference of 14 European leaders under the chairmanship of the then German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck formalized the partitioning of Africa by Europe. At the end of the conference, Africa became colonized for the sole economic benefit of European nations like Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Italy, and Spain. Although African nations gained quote-unquote independence in the mid-20th century, neocolonialism emerged as a convenient replacement for colonization, as a means to the continuing economic exploitation of Africa. In this video by AFRICA Rebound, we dive into the mechanisms of neocolonialism and its negative impact on Africa's economic development. At the end, we recommend specific steps African nations must take to overcome this persistent challenge. If you would like to receive similar insights about Africa's economic development, remember to subscribe to this channel. Now let's get right into it. Neocolonialism is practiced primarily through economic exploitation, debt dependency, and unfair international trade agreements. One major example is France-Afrique, or French Africa, a system under which France has maintained a tight monetary and economic control over the Francophone African countries. At independence, 100% of these countries' foreign currency reserves were held by France. This was only recently reduced to 50%. No nation can thrive under such a strong financial stranglehold. Another example is the exploitative extraction of natural resources. Countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, possess vast mineral wealth, including cobalt, which is crucial for modern technologies. However, multinational corporations headquartered in Western nations or in China dominate the mining industry, reaping substantial profits while contributing minimally to the country's economic development. Although DRC produces over 70% of the world's cobalt, the country remains one of the world's poorest countries, with a GDP per capita of less than $600. With respect to debt dependency, many African nations rely heavily on foreign loans to finance development projects. However, these loans often come with stringent conditions from Western institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, prescribing economic policies that further undermine African economies. For instance, in the 1980s, the structural adjustment programs of the IMF led to severe economic downturns in countries like Nigeria and Zambia, crippling industries and increasing poverty levels. Unequal and unfair international trade practices also perpetuate neocolonialism. African countries export mainly raw materials at low prices and import finished goods at higher prices, thus creating trade imbalances. African nations are often coerced into accepting unfavorable trade agreements, thus limiting their ability to develop domestic industries. The Economic Partnership Agreements, or EPAs, between the European Union and African countries are a prime example. Although Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Cameroon, and Nigeria are among the world's largest cocoa producers, they earn less than 10% of the chocolate industry value. The adverse effects of neocolonialism on Africa's economic development are profound. First, neocolonialism perpetuates poverty in Africa. The exploitation of natural resources benefits mainly foreign entities, while leaving local economies and communities impoverished. Second, neocolonialism undermines national sovereignty. African governments often find themselves beholden to foreign interests due to debt obligations or economic dependencies. This situation limits Africa's ability to implement policies that prioritize national development over foreign profits. Lastly, neocolonialism hampers industrialization and economic diversification. The focus on the export of raw materials has stunted the growth of manufacturing sectors across Africa, thereby making Africa highly dependent on the importation of the most basic items. This dependency not only drains Africa's foreign exchange reserves, but also limits job creation and technological advancement. To overcome neocolonialism, African nations must take bold and strategic steps. First, they need to prioritize economic diversification and industrialization. This involves investing in value-added production and reducing dependence on the export of raw materials. Second, African nations should seek to renegotiate unfair trade agreements and assert more control over their natural resources. African nations should revisit the existing mining contracts to ensure that greater shares of the profits remain in Africa. Botswana's recent successful renegotiation with De Beers Group, which increased its share of diamond revenues from 10% to 30%, serves as a very good example for other African nations to emulate. Third, strengthen institutions. Build robust, independent, and effective institutions to regulate foreign investments and partnerships. Fourth, strengthen intra-African trade through initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, to reduce dependency on external markets and increase Africa's bargaining power on the global stage. Fifth, encourage indigenous entrepreneurship and ownership in key, real sectors such as energy, mining, agriculture, and industry. Sixth, African leaders need to collectively assert Africa's sovereignty. Unfortunately, the African Union, AU, has not succeeded and is unlikely to succeed in achieving this objective. Even after more than 60 years of independence from Europe, the colonial fault lines are still active within the AU. What Africa really needs is a pan-African economic body made up of the largest economies on the continent and cutting across the Anglophone, Francophone, and Lusophone tendencies. Let's call this body Africa G12, made up of Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria from the north, South Africa, Angola, and DRC from the south, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana from the west, and Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania from the east. Africa G12 will be a formidable and more efficient economic group to exercise diplomatic leverage, negotiate with other economic bodies such as the G20, European Union, Asia, the BRICS, etc., and secure the best economic and financial terms on behalf of the African continent. It's high time Africa broke free from the shackles of neocolonialism and chart a path towards true economic independence and prosperity. Africa's vast resources, worth trillions of dollars, will start benefiting Africa and Africans, not foreign powers and interests. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and share it. And if you're new to this channel, kindly subscribe to receive more insights of this nature and watch other videos.